Hello everyone, Fred here. In this installment of TPP Dynamite, I'm going to be discussing my thoughts and feelings on the recent news that Henry Cavill will not be reprising his role as Clark Kent or Superman from the DCEU in James Gunn's new DCU. First things first though, if you haven't already, let me encourage you to subscribe to my channel. I regularly post reviews of films, books, and movies on this channel. I'm also an author of adult and young adult mystery novels. To date, I've released 3 books, The Women in White, The Lethal List, and most recently, Textbook Murder. All of them are on sale now, and there are purchase links in my video description below. With that in mind, and without further ado, I'm going to dig right into my topic for today. So I was partially inspired to make this video after Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson made some comments at the Oscars about how James Gunn and his new DCU have effectively put a pin in The Rock's own plans to revitalize the failing DCEU with a series of movies starring him as Black Adam and Henry Cavill as Superman, and leading to a movie in which they would fight each other in an event. Just about anybody who's been following the DC Comics brand for the past several months is probably aware of the history here by now, but here's a little recap for any of you who aren't. After putting in a few solid and generally beloved appearances as Superman in the DCEU, Henry Cavill was basically ignored for almost half a decade by the tragically inefficient former regime of leadership at Warner Brothers. Fans begged and begged for his return, and the former regime delivered crappy film after crappy film focusing on everything in the DCEU but Cavill's Superman. Finally, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson swooped in and leveraged his bankable stardom to get the old Warner Brothers regime to buy into his plans to produce a series of films starring him as Black Adam. The films were also supposed to feature Henry Cavill's return as Superman, and were supposed to lead up to a film in which the two of them would fight, basically in a huge spectacle event type scenario. Henry Cavill actually cameoed in the first one of those films, Black Adam, which was released just last year. And Henry Cavill later announced on social media shortly thereafter that he'd been given the green light by the powers that were to declare his return to the role of Superman. However, Black Adam basically failed at the box office. Add to it, the ouster and replacement of the old Warner Brothers regime was solidified around the same time after Warner Brothers merged with Discovery to make Warner Brothers Discovery. The new regime had its own plans for making a more cohesive, more effective, and better planned DC film universe, and appointed James Gunn and Peter Safran, 2 veteran and venerated filmmakers and producers, to make it happen. And James Gunn, who assumed oversight of the creative elements of said film universe, the DCU, soon announced that Superman would be rebooted with a new film focusing on a new and younger Clark Kent at the dawn of his heroic career. This, of course, means that Henry Cavill won't be playing said Superman. Henry was actually forced to return to social media and announce to his fans that his earlier triumphant message of being back was a false alarm. And while he made clear that there was no bad blood between him and James Gunn, and that they would possibly work on future projects together not related to Superman, he also made clear that his time as Superman was over, for good this time. This, of course, has drawn plenty of ire from Snyderverse stalwarts who can't imagine anyone but Henry in the role of Superman, and who view James Gunn's DCU vision that casts aside Zack Snyder's DCEU vision as the ultimate betrayal. Nevertheless, I honestly don't believe that James Gunn's canning of Henry Cavill was a bad move or a betrayal of any sort, really. Matter of fact, though time will tell, it might even be the only smart move, given the circumstances. James Gunn and Peter Safran seem to want to go back to basics in building a cohesive, shared universe of films, TV shows, and even video games. And though it's hard to hear this, that's probably the best way to handle the absolute mess that the old Warner Brothers regime made of the DCEU. The mess that James Gunn and Peter Safran inherited when they took over. Because that's the other thing. You can't forget that James Gunn and Peter Safran are basically beginning this race several steps behind the starting line, because they not only have to build up the new DC universe, but they're also responsible for releasing and fielding backlash associated with problematic movies that the old regime filmed and planned for release before the merger was complete. Movies like The Flash or Shazam 2 or Aquaman 2, with all their associated troubles that have come to light over the years. Meanwhile, restarting for Gunn and Safran is unfortunately going to mean probably casting actors and actresses for the Justice League who can portray film versions of those characters in their 20s or 30s for at least 10 years. Like it or not, Henry Cavill is now 39 and will be early 40s before Gunn's new Superman film even starts filming for a 2025 release, let alone future films set in James Gunn's new universe. Henry Cavill does not have a baby face anymore. He still looks good, but his age was already showing just a bit even in his brief cameo in Black Adam. He's just too old. Those are the facts. I believe Henry was a perfect Superman, and I liked him in Man of Steel. It wasn't a bad movie, and if Warner Brothers' old regime had just kept its wits about itself and slowly built a proper shared universe off of Cavill's back, it might even have outdone the Marvel Cinematic Universe by now. But who knows? Especially considering that as of now the MCU is run by crazy woke radicals with no idea of what a story even is anymore. But that's another tangent that I'm not going to get into right now. Just like the tangent about how Warner Brothers never should have hired Zack Snyder to oversee a shared film universe in the first place, but should have listened to him after he was hired and tried to go slowly in building his universe instead of rushing to pump out Justice League. Anyway, it's a crying shame that Henry Cavill never got the time or the narrative arcs to make his Superman role as iconic as Robert Downey Jr. or Chris Evans did with their Iron Man or Captain America roles. Henry truly was a prime victim of the poor structure and saddening lack of direction of the Warner Brothers' old regime. But now it's too late to use him in the capacity of Superman in a rebooted and younger skewing DCU. James Gunn, meanwhile, has been left holding the bag and is essentially being forced to make the hard decision of using a younger actor for the greater good of DC films. And again, time will tell, but it's most probably also the right decision that he's making. At any rate, if you agree or even disagree, let me know. Sound off in the comments below. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, click subscribe, and please ring that bell. So long.